The night had a way of making people invisible, especially when they were already tired of being seen as nothing. On a freezing winter evening outside a glowing corporate complex in Chicago, a single father stood with numb fingers and a hollow chest, watching his breath turn into mist as he waited for a bus that was already late. His name was Matthew Carter, and at that moment, he believed his life had shrunk into nothing more than surviving one cold night at a time. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and quiet miracles that happen when no one is watching, take a moment right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that humanity still exists. Matthew had not always lived this way. Once he had dreams large enough to scare him. He had studied logistics, believed in hard work, and imagined providing a steady, happy life for his young son Caleb. But life had a brutal way of rearranging plans. After his wife passed away unexpectedly, Matthew's world collapsed inward. Medical bills piled up, grief hollowed him out, and responsibilities doubled overnight. He took whatever work he could find, eventually landing a maintenance and delivery support role at a massive corporate headquarters downtown. The pay barely covered rent, daycare, and groceries. But he showed up every day because quitting was not an option when a child depended on you. That night, Matthew had stayed late fixing a loading dock issue after a shipment delay. The temperature had dropped sharply, and the wind cut through the concrete plaza like a blade. He pulled his worn jacket tighter around himself, the same jacket he had owned for nearly 6 years, its lining frayed and sleeves faded. It was the only thing standing between him and the cold. As he waited under a flickering streetlight, he noticed a woman sitting alone on a stone bench near the entrance, her posture folded inward, shoulders shaking slightly. At first he assumed she was waiting for a ride, like many others who passed through that place. Then he noticed her face, pale and wet with tears that glistened under the artificial lights. Matthew hesitated. He had learned that people in pain often wanted privacy. He also knew what it felt like to be drowning silently while the world rushed past. Something inside him refused to let him look away. He stepped closer and realized she was trembling violently, her coat lying beside her instead of around her shoulders, as if she had forgotten how to protect herself. Her name, he would later learn, was Rachel Whitmore, though at that moment she was simply a woman breaking under the weight of something unseen. Without thinking too much, Matthew slipped off his jacket and gently draped it over her shoulders. The cold hit him instantly, but he barely noticed. What mattered was the way her breathing slowed, the way her shoulders stopped shaking as violently. He gave a small nod, offered a quiet, reassuring smile, and stepped back, not asking questions, not expecting thanks. He had learned that kindness did not need recognition to be real. He turned away before she could say anything, because sometimes the hardest thing was staying when you knew you had nothing left to give. Matthew stood there shivering, hands buried in his pockets, staring at the dark windows of the building he served every day but would never belong to. He wondered how many nights he could keep doing this, how long he could balance exhaustion and hope before one of them broke. The bus finally arrived, and he boarded it feeling colder than before, but strangely lighter, as if he had left something important behind on that bench. The next morning, reality returned without mercy. Caleb needed breakfast, school forms needed signing, and Matthew needed to be at work early. He dropped his son off at daycare with a tired smile, promising himself that someday, somehow, things would get easier. At the corporate building, whispers buzzed through the halls. There was talk of a surprise executive visit, of major changes coming. Matthew focused on his tasks, unaware that his small act of kindness had already begun to ripple outward. In a high-rise office overlooking the city, Rachel Whitmore sat alone, staring at the skyline she had conquered but no longer recognized. As the CEO and majority owner of the company Matthew worked for, she was known for her sharp decisions and relentless drive. But the night before had shattered her armor. A betrayal by someone she trusted deeply, combined with the crushing loneliness that came with her position, had finally broken her. Sitting on that bench, she had not been a powerful executive. She had been a woman who felt unloved, unseen, and exhausted beyond words. The warmth of Matthew's jacket had felt like more than fabric. It had felt like proof that someone, somewhere, still cared. He had not known who she was. He had not asked for anything. That simple fact haunted her more than any business crisis ever had. All night she had thought about the man with tired eyes who gave away the only warmth he had and walked off into the cold without looking back. Rachel made a decision that morning that would alter more than just corporate strategy. She asked her assistant to find the man who worked late at the loading docks, the one who took the bus and wore a faded jacket. It did not take long. Matthew Carter's file landed on her desk, thin and unremarkable by executive standards, yet heavy with quiet resilience. Over the next few days, Matthew noticed subtle changes. Supervisors who barely acknowledged him before now greeted him by name. His schedule became more stable. Overtime opportunities appeared without him asking. He assumed it was coincidence, or perhaps luck finally tipping slightly in his favor. He had no idea that someone was watching, learning, and reconsidering everything she thought she knew about the people who kept her empire running. Rachel began walking through the building more often, observing instead of commanding. She saw Matthew repairing equipment with care, helping coworkers without complaint, and taking phone calls from daycare with a softness that contrasted sharply with his hardened exterior. She saw a man who carried responsibility like a second skin, never asking for sympathy. The realization settled heavily in her chest. This was the kind of person her company depended on, yet barely noticed. When the truth finally surfaced, it was not with drama or grand gestures. Matthew was called into a meeting room, heart pounding, certain he had done something wrong. Rachel sat across from him, her expression calm but eyes filled with something deeper. She spoke about that night, about the bench, the cold, and the jacket. Recognition washed over Matthew slowly, followed by disbelief. He had helped a stranger. He had not known he was standing before the woman who owned the very floors he cleaned. Rachel did not praise him like a hero. She thanked him like a human being. She told him how that moment had changed her, how it reminded her of why the company existed beyond profits. Then she did something Matthew never expected. She offered him a position in operations support management, training provided, flexible hours, and a salary that made his hands tremble when he heard the number. She spoke about potential, about trust, about the kind of leadership built on empathy. Matthew walked home that day in a daze, the weight on his shoulders lighter than it had been in years. When he hugged Caleb that night, he held him longer, breathing in the certainty that maybe, just maybe, the future did not have to be a constant fight. He thought about the jacket he had given away, now returned to him freshly cleaned, folded neatly with a note that simply said, "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible." Life did not become perfect overnight. There were still bills, long days, and moments of doubt. But there was also stability, dignity, and hope. Rachel transformed the company culture, introducing programs that valued workers at every level, not because it was trendy, but because she had felt the impact of being treated like a person when she needed it most. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can change lives in